totally live. All right. Hello there, Facebook world, Twitter, and YouTube. Jay Cherry here. I have a great show planned for you. I have a guest, Josiah Dan, in the house while he's on phone with me. Just want to let you guys know that you can visit me online at jcherrypresents.com, where you can make a taxable deductible donation to help support our show. Now, just a little introduction about Josiah. I met him a couple weeks ago at the Liberty Rally on a small business event, and what an amazing speech he gave. So say hi, Josiah.
Hey, how you doing today?
Good. So I have Josiah is not on video with me because he can't use Skype right now because Josiah, now I know my little friends are going to freak out, but don't freak out. He was on Alex Jones' show a couple days ago, correct?
Yeah, on Sunday.
So you were on Alex Jones' show on Sunday, and now you can't use Skype.
Yeah, they had me do this, download Skype to do their interview, and everything went fine that day. And I just went to log in this afternoon to try and connect to you. I had to go through all of these corrective measures to try and open my account, and it said that I had content that violated their terms of use, and so it wouldn't let me do anything anymore on Skype.
So you didn't even have Skype before this, correct? This was the first time you used Skype for all of one interview, and it just happened to be on the infamous InfoWars, correct?
That is correct.
So this kind of threw a boomerang into our show today because I was planning on bringing Josiah so you could see him. We would have a split screen and you'd be able to see him, but so that threw me a little bit of a curveball, and I'm be looking into other avenues besides Skype to bring people into talk, because the censorship is pretty intense, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it definitely seems to be that way.
I mean, that the powers that be could stop somebody. So I'm going to play like just a bit of a clip of your speech for anybody out there who's tuned in, who hasn't seen the video. Went viral. So it was really an exciting moment. You are such an impassioned speaker, Josiah. You just lit it up. That electrified with truth. Just being there, the energy that day was quite incredible. We are up against really some insurmountable odds with what's happening all across the country, all across the world, and Josiah just really said it in such a way that it deeply, deeply moves. So I'm going to play a clip from that, and I'm not going to play the whole thing. I'm going to play part of it. Zoom. Yeah, I'm going to be looking into Zoom. Thank you. I really appreciate that, Michelle. So I didn't have time today to figure out how to bring Zoom into my video system and get this show going with Josiah. So I figured I'd do it the old-fashioned way with the phone by the microphone, which I used to do for radio and also writing articles. So, okay, let's play this little clip. Let's take a look at this. So here we go. This is Josiah. This is Hartford, Connecticut on May the 20th. Oops, wait a minute. Where did that go? Hold on a second. Just a slight technical glitch here. I got the wrong screen up for you guys. Let me just get rid of that. Bear with me. I got thrown a little bit of a curveball after Skype refused to let us run that. Let me make sure you guys are seeing what I'm seeing. Hopefully, let me see that. Are we seeing that? We are seeing still maybe the screen. Let me see. Okay, here we go.
That the healthcare community is not of one mind. I have had many conversations with my colleagues who have expressed dissenting opinions from the apparent mainstream view. Should we mask? Should we open businesses? Should we be in fear of our lives? If we listen to the media and the governor, like our own, the answer to this question actually stands in defiance of the data and history. The hospital that I work for has been, for the most part, eerily quiet for the past several months, since all this hysteria began. Many hospitals have been forced to furlough their workers and operate on budgets that put them in the red financially. Our country has largely shut down its workforce and hidden in fear from an invisible enemy that has claimed in the ballpark of as many lives as a bad, severe flu season. In 1968 and 69, our country experienced the Hong Kong flu, which claimed 100,000 lives in the United States alone. And still, the Woodstock Music Festival went off without a hitch. U.S. businesses and private sector did not shut down, and a forced artificial depression did not occur. However, today we collectively suffer from broad business closures, violating both the Constitution and our individual rights. driving the state and federal government to put us further into national debt by creating massive bailouts to cover the inept policy choices that have been made over these past several months. Mandatory masking policies are in large part a spurious attempt at best to gain PR for the state officials seeming to act as if they are doing something to protect us as individuals, while in fact may very well be putting us at higher risk for illness. Now listen to this. Anthony Fauci cautioned that people should see masks and think healthcare professionals in terms of use and necessity. The Surgeon General, Jerome Adams, has warned that general public should not wear masks as it can actually increase your risk of catching the disease. Masks are intended to be single use and disposed of afterward, not used all day, every day. The masks usually become a vector for transmission as most people wear them everywhere and constantly touch the mask and then their face and then everything else around them, thus potentially cross-contaminating everything.
I'm going to stop there. It's such a great speech. And you guys could totally check that out. Let me see. I didn't get my screen right here. I'm having some technical difficulties. Here I am. I'm back again, guys. Okay, I've got Josiah on the phone with me because we couldn't do the interview the way I typically do with Skype because he is being censored. So that's the speech that was in Hartford, and I have a link for that so you could go watch the whole speech. I totally recommend checking it out. It was quite incredible. So tell me, you are so brave for coming out and speaking like this, because being that you're a healthcare professional, that's really thank you for speaking out in an incredibly difficult time period.
You're welcome. I'm glad that I can do so. You can thank actually my wife for kicking me in the butt and making me do it. I mean, not that she made me do it, she just encouraged me to like get out and do something rather than sit there.
Yeah. Now, did I bump into you? Seem really familiar. Did you testify this last February at the hearing for HB 5044?
I did not. Nope.
Okay. So when I bumped into you at this event and saw your speech on so many levels, I really appreciate what you were saying from the medical perspective. And then tell the audience a little bit about your credentials. And you have a couple of degrees, one in history, correct?
Yeah, so I have a bachelor's degree in history with a minor in physical education. I got that degree and then decided I didn't want to become an educator in terms of like public school and such. And so I had to figure out what I was going to do next. I was engaged to my now wife, and I figured I needed to get like a career job, not just, I was working at a hospital at the time. I had been working in the environmental services department, and which is housekeeping, and doing all sorts of different types of jobs there. And I'd been there for quite some time. So I looked at different options, considered, what's this nursing thing about? Because I knew a lot of nurses, and I figured, I'm good with people. I like to help people, and I'll check it out. And so that's kind of the avenue that I went. I applied for a program after I started taking some prereqs to see if I liked the classes. I loved them. Mm-hmm. I did my bio and my A&P and all that stuff, and I just loved learning about the science of how the body works, and that's kind of how I got to where I am with nursing. I have a pretty broad scope of experience with working in healthcare. I've worked in the environmental services department. I've worked in the plant operations department of the hospital, which manages facilities. I have worked in shipping and receiving, managing medical supplies, and delivering them to units. I've worked in psych, doing sitting for psych patients. I've been a PCA or CNA, which is an aide to the nurses to help take care of patients. I've also been on the decon/hazmat team when our facility had that back in the early 2000s after 9/11 blew up, and people were really concerned about bioterror. I participated in that program and was in that organization for like a year or two. And I've worked in psych nursing. I've worked in medical surgical nursing. I've worked in ER, which is where I currently am full time. And I've also done and currently do ambulatory care nursing for surgeries as well.
Wow. So you have quite a resume of experience. So I would say you have quite a handle on health and the human body and working with people in all kinds of different situations.
Yeah, I think I have a pretty good foundation of things to work off of, because I think about things not in a strictly linear fashion. Let me put it that way. I think linearly, but I draw things from a lot of different backgrounds because I read a lot of different stuff. I love reading history. I love learning history. I love learning about the body. I love learning about science. I love learning about religion and philosophy and faith. And so all of that stuff gets drawn into how I look at how things work.
And that's what was so exciting about your speech, because there was a bit of all of that in there. And I loved the passion that you have to tell your story about being an ER nurse. So if I could go there for our audience, what has it been like working in the ER during this COVID pandemic?
Sure. So at the ER that I work at, initially everybody was very hesitant and like concerned about what this new virus was. So we all kind of went along with, hey, we need to play this super safe. So these are the new protocols that we're going to be rolling out, and this is how we're going to have to take care of people, and using PPE and all this other stuff that is necessary for making sure that we are trying to protect ourselves so that we can protect our patients. And as things have progressed, I mean, we were expecting to see like these massive amounts of people that were sick with this new virus. And granted, we had days where we were getting slammed, but it was partly because we had like in an ER setting, we were constantly getting all types of patients. So we have psych patients coming in because they're suicidal or hearing voices, all sorts of different stuff, and drunk people that need to be treated because they're intoxicated and can't take care of themselves. And then you got all these people with legitimate, like real sick illnesses, heart attacks, strokes, COPD exacerbations, people that can't breathe, that really need to be put on a vent or put on high flow oxygen. And then you add in this other piece where you have a potentially severely infectious disease that we were considering with COVID-19. And that just adds a layer of complexity because now we have to do all this PPE processing where we have to gown up, put gloves on, double layer the gloves, put a mask on, an N95 plus a standard surgical mask. And in my case, I have to use a PAPR hood because I don't fit any of those, which is
So you had to use both an N95 and a surgical mask.
Yeah. So it's double layer masking for people while they're in care. So and that makes it really challenging once you're in there doing the care for breathing and for like overheating and all that stuff. So the longer you're doing that, patient after patient, you do get a little bit more exhausted. For myself, I can't wear N95s because I've never been able to positively have a positive fit test, which means they don't seal to my face because of the shape of my face.
A positive fit test. See, these are things people never hear about. That's because it has to be put on your face correctly for it to stop anything from getting out of you and getting into you, kind of thing. Correct?
That's correct. And with that, like the general population of people that are going out and buying all these N95 masks, you're not really doing yourself any favors because there's multiple sizes, and you have to actually go through a fit testing process where they use like a saccharin scent / flavored aerosol that you put the mask on. You put the mask on inside of a hood, and they spray this stuff around you, and you have to tell them if you can smell it or taste it, and if you can, then that means you're not getting a good fit, which means it's not sealing around your face.
Oh my gosh, that is just wild. So they make you put a hood on. This is to get your mask fitted. So folks out there who are just popping in, I just want to tell you, because I don't have Josiah isn't, you can't see him, we're talking via phone. He couldn't be in where he could talk via phone through Skype, which is what I use because he's being censored for appearing on doing an interview with Alex Jones on InfoWars a couple days ago, which is totally bogus. We're having a conversation right now about he's an ER nurse, and he's talking about getting fitted for a mask. Wow, that is quite the process. Oh my gosh.
So yeah, it's not as simple as just going out to the store and buying a mask and thinking it's going to work for you.
Wow. So they put the mask on to you get a proper fit. Then they put a hood over your head while you're wearing the mask to see if you could smell this a spray.
Yeah, it's a saccharin spray. So like when the saccharin's a sweetener that you use in coffee or whatever for people that can't have sugar.
Yeah.
And so with saccharin, it's got a particular smell and a particular flavor when they use it as an aerosol, so you can taste it just breathing it in. And the hood that they put over your head is like it's got a clear shield on one side, so you can see out of the hood, or it's basically like a bag. Consider it like a plastic bag or a paper bag with a plastic shield opening on it, so you can see out of it. And then there's a little hole in it, and they put a device up to that hole that they spray the saccharin spray into the hood. So it's concentrated around your head, and you're breathing in, and they tell you to move your head around, look up and down, talk, and if you can smell or taste the saccharin, then you don't have a positive fit.
Wow. So, and you've never been able to really, you've always could smell the saccharin.
Yeah, I could always. It's more of a taste thing than a smell. It tastes horrible.
Yeah, I can imagine. God only knows what what's mixed in there that they're spraying too. Wow,
Well, the
that's
saccharin is not really all that great for you. I mean, it's a known cancer causer and all this other stuff, but it's what they
wow.
use.
That's so incredibly wild. What a story. I never would have thought that. And I think there's a lot of people out there that, when it comes to the mask, and I picked that part of the video because it's been something that's, yeah, I love the fact that you quoted Baylock and let folks. So this speech is available. I'll put a comment in the link so you guys can watch the entire speech. I haven't uploaded it yet to YouTube, but I do plan on doing that to hear his whole speech. But we're talking about the health aspects of it right now. And I love the way you're combining all of your experience as a living and thinking human being into how you delivered that speech was just great. So the mask thing to me is it's like I think it's a form of control, because if you're not putting it on properly, it's not doing anything, and then you're double masking it with a surgical mask and an N95, and right now people are being really kind of bullied into having to walk around with this, and there are health complications too from wearing this. Obviously you're saying that it would make you tired when you're all double masked up and working on patients,
Mm-hmm.
because breathing in CO2 is not a good idea. Your own CO2 is not a good thing to do for a prolonged period of time.
That is correct. I mean, like, granted, in the past, I mean, like, when I worked in housekeeping, we had to wear these kind of things when we were going in clean rooms and stuff, and sometimes you're in there for a while. But when you're doing it, you have the mask on for however long you're in the room, and then you take it off when you leave. Now the changes in protocol are dictating that we have to wear, if you like, unlike myself, if you can fit an N95 mask, you're supposed to wear it all day long while you work with a mask over the top the same way. And it doesn't really seem to make sense to me based on
No.
what I know from the data.
Yeah, and I just isn't that's like an impossible thing to be in a mask like that for 8 hours a day. My sister-in-law, who is a nurse, said that you're constant she would have to change them, the first one. That was the protocol before we had COVID, where you change them and you discard them between each patient. Is that typical?
Yeah. So when when you have the proper amount of PPE, then you're supposed to be swapping things out. So when you take care of a patient, you have gloves on. You don't wear gloves between patients. You take the gloves off. You wash your hands. You know put your next pair of gloves on to work with the next patient. Same thing with masking. You're supposed to have a mask on for your care with that patient. You throw it away. You put a different mask on for your care with the next patient. N95s are not supposed to be reusable. They're supposed to be disposable. So we've had to actually come up with protocols to try and clean them. And
Wow.
at the beginning of all this, like, we're being told by our employers and by the manufacturers of these goods and the people that are trying to get them sent to us that there's not enough of them, so we have to conserve. And in the process of conserving, we have to try and figure out, hey, how do you actually conserve things that are single-use items? I mean, like, not to be gross, but how do you conserve a condom? I mean, like, you don't do that.
No, and that's when you're with a mask, if you're catching all your breath for 8 hours, that's oh gosh, you can't. Wait a minute. Wow. So that is such a phenomenal story that here you are on the front lines of all the people who would need a mask. It would be people exposed to sick folks. That would be, and then they don't even have enough of this proper gear for you at a hospital to take
Mm-hmm.
care of the sick. So what started to change for you while you were there? You're working under these conditions. Don't have the proper PPE, and first you're busy. What starts to happen? What starts to transform as we're in this pandemic?
Okay, I mean, like, just to go back a little bit, at our facility, we actually were kind of well set up. We had a good amount of reserve, so we did have the correct type of PPE and good amounts of it, but we were told that we needed to conserve it because of issues with supply chain, essentially, like being able to
Okay.
order these products from 3M or wherever we got them from, and then get them here in a timely manner. So we were told that we had to conserve a lot of things. So we were set up and had a good amount of things, but we still were conserving. And so for our care, we were doing our best to make sure that we spent. If we were dressed in our PPE, we would spend all of our time in the room doing everything we needed to do for care for that patient, instead of going in and out and having to constantly waste PPE, like our gowns, which we have to throw away because they're single use and they're like a paper, which you can't really clean. So at any rate, the just so that you and your viewers and listeners have an idea, it's like not all facilities were in horrible conditions in terms of having PPE. Some facilities had a good reserve and could start from a good place, and some didn't. A lot of nursing homes and organizations that brought their patients to our hospital were not in a very good spot.
Oh, so you were getting an influx of people in nursing homes into your hospital.
Yeah, nursing homes. We have people coming in from nursing homes and group homes, where there's people with mental handicaps or physical disabilities that are cared for, and oftentimes many of those people had multiple co-occurring conditions that actually put them at severe risk
Yeah.
for the virus. So, like when you had one patient that tested positive in a group home for COVID, it was not an uncommon thing to have multiple patients from that, or they're not called patients in the homes; they're called like guests or clients. And so we'd have multiple clients coming in from the same place because one person was positive, and then everybody else kind of was testing positive around them. The other thing is that there are shortages in PPE because healthy people are eating up masks and supplies. So when the government started to tell us as citizens, like when Fauci would go to the podium and tell us, hey, there's this new virus and all this stuff is happening and all this fear mongering was happening in the media, everybody and their brother went out to Home Depot, Lowe's, any hardware store they could find, and going online to Amazon and buying up all the masks. And so, as a healthcare provider myself, or healthcare personnel, I'm not a provider, I'm not a doctor, but as a nurse, I was considering, because I couldn't fit an N95 mask, and I had to wear the PAPR hood, which is a positive air pressure hood with constant air feed. I was like, well, let me see if I could find something online. I went to Amazon and was looking at these masks that the EMS guys were wearing, and they're like a neoprene mask with N95 filters on them. All of those were sold out, so I couldn't get access to those either. So it was like, and the prices, if you could find it, were jacked up. So it was really hard to get a hold of things because all the population of the United States just went out and bought everything up.
Yeah, because of the hysteria and the media. And you have what I find really interesting is the way it goes. What, wear a mask, don't wear a mask. It's this, it's that. It's just the story keeps changing all the time. And there's a video of Fauci talking about not using a mask, and then they say, "Oh, we said that so that hospitals would be able to get the gear. So now we're saying to use a mask." There's a lot of discrepancies
Yeah,
going
well, the
about.
Surgeon General didn't do that. The Surgeon General came out with a statement about what the best practices are for the general population, and he also said, if you feel comfortable wearing a mask and it makes you feel like you're going to be better, then that's fine, it's your choice. But he also specified that these things may actually not be that good for you, so consider the risks when you're doing it. And that was an appropriate way to say it. Like,
Yeah,
it was not spelled out by Anthony Fauci that there are risks to wearing masks,
yeah,
but it was by the Surgeon General, which I think was an appropriate measure to take as someone who's in authority and speaking to a large group of people. Like, you're trying to prepare people for an understanding of why they're doing it and that there is risk and benefit. And that's the thing that I get to when I talk about healthcare choices
yeah.
and health choice. Like in my interview with Alex Jones, I have opinions about vaccines that I choose for myself and that we discussed as a family that we choose for ourselves. That it's not everybody's choice to do what I'm doing. And so having an informed discussion and answering questions, asking questions, and having discussions with your healthcare providers is essential. And it shouldn't be a one size fits all. This is everything that you do for this particular condition, and there's no questions asked.
Yeah, that's what I love. I love that she fused that into there, because that's what brought me into using my skills as a broadcaster and also as an activist of medical freedom of choice. So it's not anti-vaccine. It's not, nobody's denying a virus. Nobody's, these things where they put it in a vacuum. It's this or it's that. You can't, have choice or critical thought or to question things. So I really appreciate that you support that, and being in the medical field, that's your thinking, because that to me is it's about personal choice and responsibility, which brings us into our most beautiful thing that we have is the Bill of Rights in the Constitution of the United States, which
Yep.
allows us to make educated decisions. Like, there's so much out there, like people are, and I appreciate what the Surgeon General is saying, and he hasn't retracted any of that statement, correct? I haven't seen that retracted, like all of a sudden. Now I haven't seen much of him on the mask since that statement. So what it comes down to, and I was thinking about this today, and I'm thinking about it in the broader sense of all medical choices, they should always be choices. Where is it that the government gets to decide your medical choices? That's just, to me, is
They don't, and that's why I brought in what I brought in. I had a discussion with my brother who put out some good points. Is that I cited from information from the Nuremberg codes and from the Helsinki Declaration of Helsinki. So those are international declarations or codes that were set up. Like the Nuremberg codes were set up after World War II because of what happened in Germany to the Jews. They were being forced to undergo medical experimentation by people like Dr. Mengele, who destroyed families, did twin studies, and butchered people, and all this stuff against people's will. And for people that don't know, the concentration camps of World War II that were set up by Germany was actually a agreement between the Nazi Party and the pharmaceutical industry. So,
wow.
IG Farben and Bayer, which is one of their subsidiary companies, which now owns Monsanto. IG Farben was the giant parent company that existed in Germany, and they had corporate agreements with the Nazi Party to fund them and pay for their military works as long as they built them the facilities to develop the drugs that they wanted to develop and questionably do experiments on humans to see how those drugs worked. So it's a corporate. This whole talk about I think it was Eisenhower who warned the American people about this military industrial complex. He wasn't joking. He was talking from reality. He saw what was happening in Germany, and these Nuremberg codes that were written to try and prevent this from ever happening again. But at the same time, the Nuremberg trials allowed many of these people to essentially get off scot-free. There was only 12 or 15 people that were actually prosecuted by Nuremberg trials, and the rest of them, all these very intelligent doctors from Germany who were part of the Nazi Party, actually got shipped to the United States and other nations in the world and started doing projects there. So it's a very sordid history, but at any rate, I was citing from international law, which is at best, it's not necessarily directly applicable here because it's hard to prosecute something internationally inside a country that has its own sovereignty. But it's kind of like set out there as a goal that these are rights that people should have internationally. So in the United States, we have informed consent, which is a mandatory for healthcare providers and institutions to tell patients, you have the right to be informed, and we are mandated to inform you about medical intervention. So if I have a patient in the emergency department who's going to be receiving or has a stroke, and they have a medication for strokes called TPA, which is a medication that helps to break down clot formations that may have precipitated the stroke. So as long as it's not a brain bleed type of stroke, it's a clot stroke, we can offer the patient TPA. But TPA comes with risks as well as potential benefits. And if you have a stroke and it's obstruction because of a clot and they offer you TPA, there is a risk that you can die because it's breaking down the clot in your system, but that's also making the rest of your clotting factors not function. So if you have a bleed somewhere else, you're going to potentially bleed out. So with informed consent, we have to provide information to the patient telling them, look, these are the risks and these are the benefits. We are not telling you have to do one or the other. We may make recommendations, but it is
Mm-hmm.
ultimately your choice. And so informed consent laws protect us, at least currently. There is a shift in the medical community, partly because of legislation and because of pharmaceutical pressure, to kind of get rid of those things. So with vaccinations in particular, vaccine manufacturers and pharmaceutical companies are pressuring legislators to actually enact laws directly that violate informed consent, that essentially mandate children to have to receive vaccines to participate in society as students. Sorry, my dog is barking.
That's okay. You know, so that is so the informed consent is so key, and it is alarming, and you've hit some really important points there with the heavy pressure from the pharmaceutical industry, guys. It really does come down to, it's not about your health, it's about the lobbying power behind these this legislation, because we are in a place in our history right now that's very scary, where informed consent doesn't seem to matter if it's for the greater good. And that argument of the greater good is very concerning to me, because everybody is different, and everything, there are risks, like what the story you just said about people having a stroke and the risks it would take for them with this, certain type of drug or whatever. And that's what good medical care is, to have informed consent, to say yes or no to a treatment, or even a modality of medicine, if you want to go outside of the paradigm of allopathic and explore other ways of healing. All that should be open to the public, without any problem. And now with the vaccines, what's really is what they really are wanting to do is this going to be a compulsory a vaccine for COVID. And I'm very concerned about that. And I feel like the masks are very much like that step. Like, well, if you get the people to accept masking all the time for the greater good, because now it's not about wearing the mask for you, it's about wearing it for other people, taking away your choice for your own health, how that affects you, and putting you in a position of you have to because you're not a nice person and you don't love, your neighbor. But that's the
Yeah.
farthest thing from the truth. We're all different and unique, and informed consent and medical freedom are paramount. And what's going to happen when they fast track this vaccine, this what is it? It's like it's an RMAR, or it's an RNA vaccine, mRNA,
Yeah.
which Moderna is putting out. Their science already for what they have with their early trials are quite scary, and they're celebrating this.
Yeah.
So informed consent is really, really paramount. And there it ties into our Constitution. I love what you said about knowing the law. And we'll wrap it up in a little bit. And I'm going to have you back on when we get our studio up and running. We'll have you in the studio with us. But just to wrap up, let's just go into how you tied it into knowing the law and the Constitution. I thought that was so powerful, and so important for folks. And I feel like people have forgotten.
Yeah. So there's a kind of multi-layers of this. I'm just going to quickly address the prior point that you made about this whole greater good idea.
Yeah.
It's actually been a shift from an individual-driven society. So in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, we are guaranteed individual liberties.
Yeah.
And there has been a historical trend shifting the United States away from that view and away from like a more capitalistic, independent thought view towards a more communist driven view, where the conglomerate of the whole matters more than the rights of the individual. So that's in very opposition to our founding documents and our Constitution. And so those are good points to make sure that you remember, because the arguments that we're hearing about us not caring about people, it's coming from a communist or a Marxist dialectic point of view, to shift us away from thinking about things as they really are, or as they're guaranteed to us by our protected liberties, and just making us think, oh, well, everybody else matters more than I do. Well, each of us collectively make up this country. So each of us has individual rights and liberties and expectations of how we're supposed to be able to live and be independent. And those things are not unimportant. They are actually very important, because my choices to how I raise my child are my choices. They're not the government's choice to tell me that I have to put my child in public education, for instance, because they disagree with my socioeconomic views or my religious views or whatever that happens to be. And that's actually an argument that we're hearing from a Harvard professor at this time, is that there should be no more homeschooling because homeschoolers tend to be Christians or tend to be more conservative, and therefore they're indoctrinating their kids into this way of life or thought process. Well, public education, if it's driven from a liberal point of view, is doing exactly the same thing. They just don't like people learning about conservative views or Christian views. They don't want us to be educated that way. They want us to be indoctrinated into their way, and that's it. That's the only thing that matters.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really seems like we're into this driving force right now, which is a very scary time in our country. That's why I really appreciated your words about knowing the law and knowing and understanding what your rights are. And I think, I think it's so important that our children have civics and real civics, not social studies, which is taking over what civics was.
Yep.
And again, I hear the threats happening with homeschooling, and it's really, these are trying times in our history, and I think it's important for people to speak out. That's why I really commend you for coming out and for giving such a passionate speech, for becoming part of this movement for liberty here in Connecticut. We need we need to gather all the people up. And I want to say this out there as we wrap up the show. So on June the 6th, we're going to be back up at the Capitol. So this is going to be sponsored by Walkaway and the Connecticut Freedom Alliance. And I got to reach out to Jonathan from the Libertarian Party. And we're going to do something on the 6th where we want to have another rally. These are going on every Saturday. There's rallies up at the Capitol. And we really need to show up in numbers and not be afraid to speak out. It's really trying times. And especially you being in the healthcare field, to come out and be so brave to speak is thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I got a couple more things I just want to pop in
Sure.
there for you. So we have another rally this Saturday, the 30th of May at the Capitol in Hartford. I would hope to see as many people there as is possible. I plan on speaking again. I have another speech. I think this one is going to be far more intentional and well guided based on our history.
Nice.
And it talks more specifically about the things that are guaranteed to us and how we're supposed to view where we are right now. And so I'd love to see people come out. We want to pack that place.
And that's this Saturday, guys. And that starts aren't these? So just to let everybody know, as long as the weather is warm, there's going to be gatherings up at the Capitol on Saturdays. So this Saturday is from 1 to 3, and you're going to be speaking again. You have a new speech. Oh, that's awesome. And so everybody's this is permitted. The Capitol Police are notified, so don't be afraid to come on out up to the Capitol and be a part of this, especially if you're feeling like you want to express your to redress the government and to show up. The unemployment numbers are staggering. I haven't checked yet this week, but last I had checked, it was up to 504,000 unemployed people in Connecticut. And somebody else just posted this today that the SNAP benefits for people are now going back to where they were before. So working families that are struggling, that may be getting assistance from SNAP, that haven't changed anything financially and still can't work, or may have permanently lost their jobs, and now being cut back with that as well. So it's
a very challenging time for families. I mean, when you're told that you can't go to your job, that if you own a small business or your employer isn't able to open yet, and you have no money left, like, what are you supposed to do? If your benefits run out, you're not getting money from the federal government. And not that I'm saying that, I think that the federal stimulus package, it served a purpose, but we need to really question what we're doing that way, because we can't survive on printing money.
No, that's a scary thing.
If you want to end up like Russia did after World War II and keep printing money, and you'll be destitute, people walking around with carts of potatoes because you can only get one potato when it's half rotten. for your whole family. So that's what we're looking at when we talk about overprinting money. And then the other thing that I think is important is understanding our history. So I like to plug education because I like to educate people. And so if you want to see where we came from and what's been happening over the past 50 to 75 years, there's a couple of really excellent documentaries out there for you to check out. And it was produced by I believe it's a representative from Illinois. He's one of the mid states. I can't remember his name or which state he was from, but I think it was Illinois or Iowa. And it's called Agenda, and there is a second one called Agenda 2, and it's about the history of the Communist Party as it's at its founding and all the way through its history and how it's influenced and actually been like an undercurrent that's moved into the United States to infect both parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, and we can actually see it as it bears itself out in the policy choices and the direction that both parties are actually advocating for. Now, I'm not saying that one party or the other is perfect. They are not. I personally identify myself more with the Republican side. I tend to be far more of a libertarian because I am very conservative in my views, and I'm not saying that either side is devoid of problems.
Yeah, that's so perfectly put. I totally can relate to that. So it's Agenda 1 and Agenda 2?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I'm going to check that out.
The title is Agenda, and the second one is Agenda 2. Watch them. You will be blown away by what you see, and I think that everyone listening to this show should watch it, especially if you want to understand about your child's education and why we don't understand as a society the same way anymore our history, because our history is actually being destroyed at the educational level because they are not teaching the history that my parents grew up with, that I grew up with. They have changed American history to make us look like bigots, to make us look like capitalist jerks, and to favor socialism and to favor communism, so that people have this idea that, to be a good citizen of the world, I need to be a socialist, or I need to move in the direction of communists. Well, if you want to look at what communism brings, look at China. If you go to China today, if you're a Uyghur, a Christian, a Falun Gong practitioner, you're probably in a concentration camp if they know who you are.
Yeah,
because
that's
there's
true.
only one state-sponsored church in China that you're allowed to participate in, and it's called the Three Self-Patriotic Church, and they control the doctrine there. The government literally controls the doctrine there. So if you are practicing an underground church there, they catch you and you go into a prison, and it's probably the prisons that are doing forced organ harvesting, which is just talked about at the International Criminal Court in Britain in the past 3 months.
Wow. That's just, I'm just
and think about this big scientific endeavor that we had 2 or 3 years ago called the Bodies Exhibit. All those bodies came out of China.
That was really creepy.
Yep, and it shows the amazing beauty of the body that God created. But at the same time, where did those bodies come from? They said they were donated to science. Well, if you're a political prisoner, they own you.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I went through that exhibit because, I took my children there, and we went through the exhibit, and I had a really hard time with it. That was what was coming through my mind. Like this wasn't voluntary. I was literally, I felt ill because I felt like the spiritual aspect of these souls that are now just like, frozen in time forever. There was one of a mother and a baby, and I just, oh my God, it just disturbed me so deeply and felt so not right. And shortly after, I started to read about how they're putting up these camps in China, and they're locking up people and by force. That we do not want to be communists. And I think people, when you say the word communism or communist, they either are not believing it because it's being so normalized right now in our country, like this is a good thing that we should kind of be this way by telling people what to do and how to live, what medical procedures they shouldn't have, whether they should or shouldn't wear a mask, whatever it is, that this is not the foundation of a republic. This is not what a republic is, and I think even that is misunderstood. What a republic versus a democracy is. And that's a big thing to even delve into, because that happens at the educational level where people are saying it's a democracy, but it's a republic and it's different.
We're a representative republic.
Yeah. And then now that's deemed as a bad thing, and they want to totally shift and change it. So it's definitely very concerning to me, the direction we're going. So it's important, folks, to get out there and show your support, go to the Capitol and be a part of this time in history and hear and meet Josiah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Any last thoughts, as we're about at 45-minute mark, and we're definitely doing another show. I want to have you in the studio. So real quick again, if you just popped in now, you can't see Josiah because he couldn't get on Skype with me because he used the Skype app to do an interview with Alex Jones. And whatever your opinions are about that, you shouldn't be censored. No one should be censored anywhere, anytime. But this is what big tech is doing. And we could even start to talk about technocracy and the technocrats. That would be a whole other show. And how they're squashing free speech. And that's a fundamental right of our Constitution. It's a human right to be able to say what you're thinking and be able to put other ideas out there without being censored. This is really bad. So Josiah is censored on Skype right now. That's how bad it is, folks, for one interview. All right. This is ridiculous that one interview. And what is he saying? We're having a conversation. Well, you could watch the interview yourself. You can go and check it out and see that interview that he did with Alex Jones and see what's so bad about this interview that it needs to be censored. That's where nothing should ever be censored, because the answer to speech that you disagree with or don't care for
is conversation.
Yes, that's exactly it. It's a conversation. It's more speech.
It's how our founding fathers did this country. They didn't all agree on how things were supposed to be done. They were meeting to write the Federalist Papers, and they disagreed with one another. And they had discussion, and they had debate, and they came to conclusion.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I love about you speaking, because you've got a really wide range of knowledge, and your degree in history. History is so important.
Absolutely. If you forget your history, you're doomed to repeat it. So pay attention.
Pay attention, folks, and we'll end it on that note, and we'll schedule another show with you, Josiah. Thank you so much, and bye, guys. Hope to see you Saturday up at the Capitol here in Hartford, Connecticut. There's stuff happening all over the country. I've been following many different people. The Freedom Angels in California have been doing a lot. I'm so proud of all the Californians standing up and all across the country. And Leslie, who came to talk with me via Skype last week in Wisconsin, where they struck down the governor's executive orders. And I'm going to be live next Tuesday with Victoria Eloise, who is another Connecticut resident, and she is quite the researcher and has got a lot of information on Annie Lamont. And the stuff that she's got on Annie Lamont and what is happening in our state is something you really need to tune into. If you want to help support our show, visit jterrypresents.com, where you can make a secure donation that is tax deductible. And we'll be back live with more stuff happening in and around Connecticut and the country. And we'll till next time. Bye-bye.